understand how it might apply to the startup community. Okay, so next up we have another case, and this one, we're talking about, we just mentioned over-the-top type communication services, and he mentioned using Candy as a partner. Next up we're going to hear T-Mobile talking about their partnership with Twilio. So I'd like to invite up Rusty Lhamon and Chetan Chaudhary. Hi, guys.
Hey, Eric.
Good to see you. Chetan.
Hi.
Good to see you. Seats over there. Save one for me, and I'll come back for discussion later.
All right.
Here's a slide advancer.
The slided answer we have.
Over to you.
We're already ready. Well, hey guys, I was up here yesterday, so I think some of you might have been in the audience. We're going to share a little bit more today about what we're doing with Twilio. I'm Rusty Lhamon. I'm the Senior Director for IoT Solutions at T-Mobile. Most of you, I've heard a few questions from folks out there, so just to make sure everybody understands. So T-Mobile US is a publicly traded US company. We are majority owned still by Deutsche Telekom out of Germany. So you see some of our German colleagues here from the local office and from around. We have a very tight relationship, but T-Mobile US is an independent company, publicly traded. We went public in 2013. And I shared some of these stats yesterday, so before I do this again, just want to know how many people in the audience are actual T-Mobile users today? All right, so actually quite a few of you. That's great to see. If you haven't used T-Mobile, or you're not a T-Mobile user today, or maybe you used T-Mobile in the past, I shared some of this. We've been doing a lot to grow the business in the last few years. We've been very, very focused on our consumer business. So 13 quarters in a row, we've added over 1 million subscribers, over 67 million now, getting closer to 70. T-Mobile passed AT&T on LTE last quarter, this quarter, I mean, in just the last little bit. OpenSignal reported this. And then again, 10 quarters in a row, fastest LTE network. We've been extremely focused on LTE. One of the things that we'd like to do really fast is remove customer pain points, and part of that was growing our coverage. So our US coverage is now 99.7% of Verizon's population coverage, and growing. So absolutely phenomenal. We've invested billions and billions of dollars in the network. And then for IoT, we've focused on a couple of things. We talked a little bit yesterday about devices, and Chetan might tell you a little bit more here in a minute, because one of the things we've done is make it easy to get devices on the network and enable low-cost devices. You see here, if you're familiar with LTE technology, most of us have it in our phones today. And you know, I did this just on the way in, just kind of check, because I was riding in Uber, and I'd kind of had an interesting experience, and the Uber driver and I were talking about phones and speeds. And so I just ran a speed test on my way in this morning about 8 o'clock, and I got 63 megabits per second download speed during rush hour here in Silicon Valley. I thought that was pretty good, and you know, it just kind of indicates the type of speeds that we're seeing on the network. And we're an eat-your-own dog food company. I don't have a special phone or anything else. I've got just like everyone else who's a customer. But in the IoT space, we're focused on some applications that don't need screaming fast speeds. They need simpler, easier, lower cost. LTE category 1, which is currently available. M1, which is the next generation, reducing battery power, making things lower cost and also longer life, especially if you're using a mobile battery device. And then in the future, you're going to see some of the new things coming with narrowband and 5G, which take this even to the further extremes. Happy to talk to folks about that later if you want, but really wanted to focus today on how people are getting on in the market. How are people introducing IoT solutions? And so Chetan is here to really talk to you about the Twilio side of this relationship. T-Mobile is investing in our network. We're investing in how we make this technical solution work for folks. Twilio's bringing a completely opposite and complementary side to this relationship, which is how do I embrace the developer? How do I make it easy and transparent for them to do something new in a space that's evolving and growing as fast as any of us can imagine? So let me hand this over to Chetan so he can tell you a little bit more about what's going on with Twilio and how we're going to connect all of the different devices that are out there. So Chetan.
Thanks. So hopefully everybody's, how many people in the audience have actually heard of Twilio before? Fantastic. I usually, when we give these talks, there's usually 1 or 2 people in the audience that have raise their hand. So as everybody knows then today, that Twilio is a cloud communications API. We are really focused on the mission of driving the future of communications. And the way that we do that is by focusing on the developer, specifically the software developer, allowing the software developer to embed any sort of communication into their application. We started out with voice, we added messaging, we've now added IP messaging, we have video, we provide SIP trunking, but it allows the software developer not to understand the traditional telco stack, so they don't need to know SIP, they don't need to know SMPP, they don't need to know any sort of complex telecommunications protocols. They just need to program in their native language. And we've taken that same approach and we've applied it with T-Mobile, and we've built sort of the first developer-focused IoT cloud. You guys use Twilio today. If you are taking an Uber and called your driver or sent a message, you own a Tesla, you've gone to Best Buy, you've received text notifications or had a phone call placed in to you, that phone call has probably come through Twilio. We've got over 1 million developers on the platform. By far, like I said, we're the largest cloud communications API. This 1 million developers are spread all throughout the world, so many of the sort of global telcos that are here today, we probably have a relationship with you. There's over 200 carriers that we're interfacing with. This is everyone from the smaller tier 3 carrier all the way to the tier 1s, where we're buying wholesale messaging and wholesale voice. So like I said, we allow today the developer to build messaging, voice, video, authentication apps. If you've done two-factor authentication, you've ever had an SMS delivery, it's probably through Twilio. About 98% of that is Twilio today, those SMS messages coming through. And so if you think about the developer's toolkit, there's typically a series of things that developers want to leverage. They use for compute power, Amazon. For database, they use MongoDB or Atlassian. For developer tools, payments, maybe Stripe. And today, Twilio is sort of the default communications platform. So if you've got any questions, usually you should ask your developer around what Twilio does because it's a technical platform. But yeah, we've now partnered with T-Mobile and to provide the first ability to actually take this complex communication, service lifecycle management that they provide today on their network, but allowing that now the developer to have really simple, easy APIs to activate, deactivate, query your usage.
And I think, Chetan, one thing we should talk about here that, this isn't a developer forum, so at a hackathon or something like this, you might actually see someone writing code and getting on. But the beauty of Twilio, if you're not a developer, is developers want tools that provide all the services they need and examples and support. And Twilio has it set up so that if you're trying to build an IoT solution today, we at T-Mobile weren't going to go build all these tools and capabilities that Twilio has. And it didn't make sense for us to do that. We knew that we needed to find a partner who could really work with us and bring that to market today. With the millions of developers that are already on Twilio, the fact that a lot of them are already moving into this IoT desire and wanted wireless, which they didn't have earlier this year before this partnership was announced, now they can just add wireless with a couple of clicks, grab some sample code, order SIMs, get development hardware if they need it or have their own if they already have it, and get online within a matter of minutes and start hitting the APIs and actually executing commands and making things work.
Yeah, even the pricing model, like you said, is innovative in itself, right? Most of the telcos here today, we don't publish pricing of how to get started. But for $2.10, a single developer can get up and running within 2 days and activate a SIM on the network. And that in itself is pretty just innovative, just to get that speed of delivery to the developer. So by providing that, it gives them the ability to now think about how to operate at scale. So how do I actually start building a supply chain? How do I start building my devices? How do I start to build my business model just by publishing those pricing?
Chetan, that sounds like a really impressively small starting point, which is $2.10. How does it scale? Is it linear for the small developer, and like how much is it relatively cheap to add voice and add texting, or how much is that going to cost them?
Yeah, so it is linear. We start out with a single tier. So if you're at 0 to 500 SIMs, and then we drop it all the way down so where it gets to pennies.
Yeah.
And we do data consumption just like a pooled, like many of the IoT companies out here today.
Yeah.
The difference is that we are publishing those pricing as pay as you go, so cancel any time, which also most IoT companies don't do. And then we allow them to add voice and messaging. T-Mobile has been fantastic about enabling these services in the back end so that we can then figure out a way to monetize it and take it to market. but they can get started for a fraction of a penny for voice or messaging.
And that kind of one of the things we mentioned on our prep call that Rusty brought up was that you guys, Rusty was pitching the fact that Twilio is a pretty viable path to market for startups. And so we're jumping ahead because you mentioned how they can get in really these low incremental starting points. But what other kind of support services would you provide if someone was saying, I want to build an app and I'm going to use Twilio? You guys have some kind of a way of helping them along?
So traditionally, the business is built in three areas, or three major pillars, I should say. The first pillar being really, really strong documentation.
Yeah.
We think of documentation as a product. It's a living, breathing product that actually gets pushed out every day. The documentation gets better. And so Rusty alluded to it, and what you're alluding to is the ability for developers to get started. We provide code samples in many different languages, many different use cases. So it allows the developer to copy and paste the code, put it into their web server, and start with Twilio within a matter of minutes. This ability to add voice, messaging, IP messaging, and video accelerates the time to market for the developer, and the faster they get to market, the better that they're going to scale with us. So that, in conjunction with a really transparent pricing model and the ability to have self-service.
Yep.
So they don't want to talk to you, and they don't want to talk to me. They just want to be able to swipe a credit card and get started. Yep. Those three main pillars make a big difference.
So, one of the things we definitely want to talk about was the deal between the two companies. And let me start it by saying there's some historic deals that always struck people as a little counterintuitive. When Hutchison Whampoa in the UK made a deal with Skype, everyone's like, what? You're making a deal with an over-the-top player. And so now we have you two companies on the stage represented here, and you go, wait, isn't Twilio kind of eating up some of the market for telecom services? How does this work? So it's obviously some kind of competition, but Rusty, tell me a little bit about how it made sense for a telecom company to work with Twilio.
Well, that's a great question, Derek. And from our point of view, we kind of like co-opetition. There's several things about it, and whether you call it co-opetition or just a really great partnership, T-Mobile is a company that's very focused on what we're doing and where we're investing heavily. And building strong partnerships is one of the things that we're investing in. And because we didn't want to go and create a pain point for our customers, we wanted to say, what does a customer want? We want to listen to them and then address that in the market. And we saw and heard the success and the relationship Twilio had with their customers, saw how they were reducing those pain points. And it really became clear to us that this is a relationship that's really beneficial for both parties. We work well together as a team. And it's not really competing so much as this is a growing segment of the business. We're all in a new era. The IoT era is just really getting started. I think if we all look back on this 10, 20 years from now, we'll say, wow, that was really the early days, Wild West. Things were really unsettled. And we want to make it easy for people to grow in this environment. And that's really where the relationship's working for us.
I think from our side, from the Twilio side, many of the carriers that we deal with, this is a very common question, which is, you're going to cannibalize my voice network. You're going to cannibalize my messaging customers. And that's always the first trigger or the first response. But many times what we're doing is bringing net new use cases that didn't exist today in the marketplace.
Yeah.
The best and the most example that we use all the time is the fact that when we started the company, getting messaging or getting voice, we started with a small little startup that was 5 guys that were thinking about a ride-sharing company. It was literally 5 people, and that company is Uber today. Now, every single telco in the market is going after how do we get Uber on our network.
Yeah.
And the fact is that we were able to do that from a really small start and grow with them.
Right.
That ability, that use case didn't exist when they were trying to build the application.
Right. And Rusty, you framed a lot as IoT, working with Twilio and IoT. Does Uber kind of fit into that IoT? Because I'm going to call an Uber from a phone. To me, it looks like a phone call from a phone. But to you, is that more or less a connected device and a data connection?
Well, that's a great example. Uber is a thing where you're connecting a lot of different pieces together. You're connecting a driver, you're connecting a car, you're connecting a customer, and sure, a lot of it is done over a phone today. Yeah. And I think one of the things we tend to get stuck in is IoT one thing or another. It really crosses all boundaries. And any of the IoT products you're talking about today that interact with a consumer, you and me, any of us people, it almost always is going to have a phone component to it.
Yep.
But then you've got completely other end of the spectrum, somebody who's managing their business and wants to build an asset tracking service, or they want to build a monitoring service to monitor some kind of sensor or meter, which might not have any personal interaction. It might be completely automated.
Yep.
That's the whole other side of IoT. The beauty of this is Chetan and Twilio bring a capability that supports all of those different aspects.
So I got to get into the partnership part, but I'm curious with all these good things about the partnership. So what kind of, and I'll ask Chetan, I guess, we're talking IoT and we're talking enabling IoT things with messaging or communication services that you bring. What kind of weird IoT things might you enable in the future? Could you possibly enable, I keep bringing up the Samsung fridge. Could you enable fridges with communications? What have you heard and what are you guys thinking of that would seem kind of wacky?
I mean, we've seen, so Twilio, the reason why we got into IoT is we were starting to see a lot of these use cases pop up where people were using SMS as a delivery mechanism from their devices, from their data-only SIMs.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we added voice and messaging to the IoT offering that we are delivering with T-Mobile, so the SIM can actually not just be data only, but has voice and messaging, because we started to see use cases like connected teddy bears. It sounds crazy, but the other day we spoke to a toy company that wants to push a button and it wants to have a cloud application where it will call 6 or 7 people, whoever picks up the phone, and now you're having a two-way communication with your child or with your loved one. Now, whether that will be successful or not, I don't know, but the fact is that that device is acting like a phone, but it's not really a phone, obviously. It doesn't dial, phone numbers, it has a single button. And so having that communication and not having that data-only service, which we traditionally think is IoT, allows the developer to innovate. And those type of things is what Twilio wants. We're a good place for developers to innovate on.
That certainly fits my bill of a weird kind of a use of this technology, so that's pretty neat, connected talking teddy bear. So let's get back to what we got to talk about is how did this partnership start? So I'll start with you, Chetan. How long ago did this partnership start? How was the engagement? And how is T-Mobile maybe distinct, in your opinion?
Yeah, so we went out to all of the carriers in the U.S. and then to many internationally. And when we first pitched T-Mobile, we got the standard sort of response that most of you guys gave us as well, which is, no, thank you, we're not interested. And then luckily, through Rusty and some of the other folks in the team, somebody picked up on it, and Rusty, as well as the upper management, said, hey, let's consider this as a potential. And it started about a year. The conversation started about a year ago, but then once the upper management and the folks picked it up, they moved faster than I've ever seen a telco move. Literally within 6 months, we had a custom platform that we could start to build on top of. We had the deal dynamics done, the contracts done, and as many of you guys know, that's not in typical carrier fashion. So it was by far the fastest that we've ever seen.
You guys were already a fairly big organization, so you had resources. Did you have to throw a whole lot of resources at it to make it carrier grade or make it ready for T-Mobile, or was it something that was already part of the technology?
Well, our stack is already, like I said, we have 200 plus carriers on the back end, so we do a lot of this interconnectivity already. But T-Mobile delivered us a net new platform to provide SIMs, and so that entire sort of platform had to be delivered in a short period of time from their end. And then now we are building out everything else on top of that to include very innovative stuff, everything from location services to DPI and everything else. And
you mentioned the prep call, and this is to credit Rusty and his organization. You said they were very aggressive compared to other carriers, T-Mobile USA. Do you find, Rusty, that you guys are aggressive aggressive in where, because we know you're aggressive in the consumer market, right? The messaging out there from the CEO on down is very aggressive and you're willing to rattle a few cages. Are you also aggressive, you think, on the back end with partnerships and trying new technologies?
I would say, I would say we're very innovative, and aggressively innovative in the sense that we like to try new things. We like to try to challenge the status quo. When we talk with the Twilio team, it's great because they bring a different perspective than, a traditional telecom company or folks that we interact with, and they ask for things that we may never been asked for before. And our team's pretty open to that. So we've got a lot of things going on. I think in the prior conference room over at the Spotlight stage, maybe half an hour ago, someone asked a question about eSIM and what's going on with that. I mean, this is an area that we've been focused on pretty heavily, and that's, it's very disruptive. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't expect a lot of the folks in the industry to be embracing, but we certainly do. And are working pretty closely with Twilio on some advances in that technology, which is all about how do I make my service more configurable and more suitable to a different application, and in eSIM case, a global application where I can localize my connectivity in the markets where I'm deploying and using my products. So that's the kind of thing that really resonates between the two of us, and like you said, it may not be what everyone else is doing, and whether you call it aggressive or innovative, it's certainly the way we live at T-Mobile.
I definitely am using aggressive in the best idea that he's pushing forward. Something we want operators to be more often than not. But yeah.
I think it's a testament to the numbers that Rusty showed earlier about the million plus customers in the last few months and quarters that have come on the consumer side. I think they've taken a very similar approach in being very aggressive on the sort of IoT front and innovative side. From our standpoint, we love that because we're a startup and we're here to disrupt the status quo, and we want to take away that existing market share of the sort of existing business of Jasper and AT&T and Verizon.
Yep.
Like, we can go out and do something very different and take away market share very easily because we're going to be moving at a pace that's much faster. And so if you're an innovator, you're going to come to us first.
Pretty cool. All right, so to remind the audience, we're almost going to wrap up. So if you have a question, please step up to one of the microphones. It's the only way I know that people have questions to ask. And so I'd like to ask you guys if there's anything you want to wrap it up. That was a pretty good close already from you, Chetan, like kind of summing it up. But so let's close with ideas about, because the idea is we talk about the history of how the deal was made over the course of about 18 months, 6 months in, you had the test project. Let's look to the next deal, Rusty. Like, say, what's out there for you that you're looking for as a next deal? And maybe for Twilio, kind of what's next for you as well. And if there's any question, we'll take it after that. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. Rusty?
Yeah, well, I'd say that the thing that we're most interested in is folks that are aligned with some of the key philosophies we have, which are, I've got a pain point, or a customer has a pain point, and I've got a solution to solve that pain point and make things easier. We want to be very transparent and clear with the customers that we deal with. I think folks see that in our consumer messaging. We want to have that same approach in this space and really work with companies that have ideas and solutions that resonate along those lines. And again, we believe that for a lot of folks getting started, what we've just done in this partnership with Twilio, this is a great way to engage. And as you see, I mean, we're here together. We do a lot of things together with the customers to help support them. If they need questions answered on best network technologies on the wireless side, our team jumps right in and supports with the Twilio team. And the Twilio team has given them a lot of help on the software side and on the overall integration, and it works pretty well. So from our point of view, if you're interested in changing the world and challenging the status quo with something that makes it life or your business easier, we're very interested in talking.
Great. Thanks. Chetan?
Yeah, like you said, the statement earlier is I would like just to reiterate the fact that if you are a telco today and you're looking to attract innovators and the net new customers onto your network, then you want to talk to Twilio, because I think that's what we're focused in on.
Let me challenge you and drill down a bit, because you're down at Cary, we didn't ask you to show the how, but how? How did we talk to you?
Just find me. I'm right here. I'll be right here out saying that. But
No,
yeah,
that's a real answer.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to you. And obviously, you can always reach out to anyone at Twilio, and we're pretty responsive.
Do you have developer channels? We didn't prep this or the idea, but do you have channels for developers to connect with you guys, or is it just the SDK kind of thing?
No, developers. We treat developers like consumers. So we are going out. They come to our platform. You can sign up within literally 30 seconds.
Right.
And you can consume anything, any voice number in 70 plus countries.
Yeah. So it's just that quick, self-serve, and off you go.
Complete self-serve, yeah.
All right, great. Well, thank you very much. If I could ask you gentlemen to hold it there and sit in your seats, because we're going to wrap up. But thank you. We'll give a round of applause. So we're going to go to break right now, or go to lunch. Just a reminder.